Okay, class, let's do chapter 49, entitled Mythical Impressions, Program Music at the End of the 19th Century. Appropriate program music. So let's go to the PowerPoint example that I prepared. And some of the elements are from the textbook, chapter 49, and the key points here tells us that Impressionism, and that's the topic here, in music is characterized by modal and exotic scales, chromatic scales, whole tone scales, and pentatonic scales, unresolved dissonances, tone combinations such as ninth chords, rich orchestral colors, and free rhythms, all generally cast in a small scale programmatic forms. The most important French Impressionist composer was Claude Debussy. His orchestral work, Prelude to the Afternoon of Faun, which we will sample, was inspired by a symbolist poem and later choreographed by the great Russian dancer Vaslav Nijinsky. What does that mean? Well, it was Vaslav Nijinsky was a choreographer and made a ballet to go with the music. So Debussy and his contemporaries were highly influenced by non-Western and traditional music styles heard at the Paris World Exhibition of 1889. So what is Impressionism? Impressionism can be seen as a reaction against the rhetoric of Romanticism. So Impressionism is French, and the French are saying, well, Romanticism is really German, disrupting the forward motion of standard harmonic progression. So Romanticism is just a supercharged classical style, really, where you have clear melodies and clear beginnings and endings and cadences. Now Impressionism abandons that, and so you don't have clear cadences, you don't have clear melodies and beginnings and endings. It all kind of just blurs together. The other composer most often associated with Impressionism is Maurice Ravel, but Debussy kind of wrote the book on Impressionism. So symbolism and Impressionism in Paris. All right, so here's Claude Monet. This is a picture of a painting of Impressionism, right? Impressionists took painters out of the studio and into the open air. The subject was light. So it's Impressionism is best described, or can be described, as how the light makes an impression on you, the painter. And you're writing or painting the impression that it makes on you. And you don't have to be French to be an Impressionist painter. And some of them were Russians and Italians and Americans. And to this day, you can see paintings and say, well, that's impressionistic because the way the light is interpreted. This is impressionistic painting, Renoir. It's always these soft pastel colors and it's not real clear edges, it's slightly blurred, but everything is always nice. I was looking for the Claude Monet sun rising, but so there we have it. And some painters, right? Claude Monet, Edward Degas, and Renoir, very famous. Many of the painters were quite famous, and there's just very entertaining pictures. Debussy, he wanted to write music that was like they were doing the paintings and they called it Impressionism. And he says, well, I want to write music that's like, that sounds like what I see. And he had a trouble coming up with the idea, but when he did, he really took off with it. So impressionistic, right? These rich orchestral colors, right? And so we refer to that term when timbre in music, and we often call it about the colors as we would in the painting. So One of the features of to make music sound impressionistic was to use modal and exotic scales, or chromatic scales, whole tone scales, pentatonic scales. Dissonance as a goal, right? Freed from need to resolve. So we just kind of have, it's okay to be dissonant. And it didn't make everybody happy, but that's the way change occurs. So here are some examples of whole tone scales. Now, before I play it, actually, I put the keyboard up here to show you that a whole tone scale consists of whole tones. And on the piano is a wonderful way to see what music would look like, right? And so from one key to the next key, going to left or right is a half step. So this is a half step. This is a half step from this key to this key, from this key to this key, half steps, right? So whole steps would be 2 half steps from here to here. So as long as you skip a key, then you are playing a whole tone scale. You could start here, D, E, then you have to skip. So you go to black key, black key, black key, and then you come back to the same point. Now in reality, there only are 2 whole tone scales, because you can, if you start on this one, and then you have to play skip black key, white key, another white key, another white key, another white key, and then black to the same, back to the same black key. So, and then if we would start here, it's really the same scale. So there only are 2, the one to start on here or the one here. Here's what it would sound like. Okay, here's this Claude Monet Impressionist painting. This is really a wonderful painting by Turner. Beautiful light and shades and pastels. There's a ship, and there's another ship that's, I think this one is defunct, and this is a kind of a tugboat. The Central Hall of the Paris World Exhibition. Rodin, right? This is, now, this exhibition in 1889 turned out to be a big event for Claude Debussy, because again, he was trying to figure out how to write music that was impressionistic, and he went to this exhibition. We don't have these anymore, but before modern technology and way communication is so fast, we would have world fairs, and a city would decide to have a world fair, and they would spend a lot of money and put up new buildings and invite countries from throughout the world to come and put on a display. And when you went to put on a display, you showed what the natural resources of your country, the culture of your country, and so it's really special. And then people would go from one exhibit to another and then see these cultures and about different countries. So it was a way to share information that was very important. Anyway, in 1889, there was a Paris exhibition. And regarding Claude Debussy, 1862 to 1918. So, most important French Impressionist composer. At age 11, attended the Paris Conservatory. At age 22, he won the Prix de Rome. Remember, Hector Berlioz won the Prix de Rome. And the Boulanger lady won the Prix de Rome. So this is, apparently they were right. When you give somebody an award and they turn out to be, you know, a huge success in their life, then that was a good choice to make that award. So Pelléas and Melisande is an opera written by Claude Debussy. when Richard Strauss and a writer went to see the Pelleas Melisande, they sat down late and the music started, and Richard Strauss, a famous composer, leaned over to the music critic and he says, "Is it all like this?" He says, "There's no melody." Here's Claude Debussy. He was a kind of sometimes not a nice man, right? And it seems that people that are really into themselves and are frequently don't care about other people's opinions and feelings, right? And he was one of those persons, like Richard Wagner also. So this piece of music, right, is based on a poem. And the poem it's called the Symbolist Poem. And here is the name of the poem. And translated means a prelude to the Afternoon of the Faun. Here, can you hear this? This is how you would say that in French.
L'après-midi d'un faune.
Again.
L'après-midi d'un faune.
That's not easy for me to say.
L'après-midi d'un faune.
Okay, there you go. So this poem, right, was I can't see the date there. Anyway, was written, and then Claude Debussy later wrote the music that he was inspired by the poem. What is the poem, right? The poem called The Afternoon of a Faun, and a faun is not like the deer fawn. It's one of those half mans, half goats things, right? Is a poem by the French author Stéphane Mallarmé, right? It describes the sensual experience of a faun who has just woken up from his afternoon sleep and discusses his encounters with several nymphs during the morning in a dreamlike monologue. Wow. So this is considered Mallarmé's best known work and a hallmark in the history of symbolism in French literature. This critic considered it to be the greatest poem in French literature. And when the poem was published, Edouard Manet, a famous Impressionist painter, did the artwork for the cover of the poem. Apparently, the Manet did this himself, and he just used pink so that he didn't have to pay for a lot of ink. So this would be the faun, I guess, half man, half goat. So this is okay. I want to play something here. This is okay, just to show you, that is what the exhibit that Debussy went to at the World's Fair and inspired him, right? And this was music from Indonesia. About over 200 million people live there in a number of islands in north of Australia before you get to Southeast Asia. So let's get to the piece of music here. Free-flowing rhythms, vague sense of pulse, harp glissandos, and it's roughly in an ABA section. So let's listen to the music. certainly helps to know the poem, right? Because it is programmatic piece of music. So it's important to point out that Claude Debussy and that piece of music is a seminal piece of music for the 20th century, right? This is a late Romantic period, but it's considered like one of the first pieces that sets off the 20th century, even though it's 1889, I believe. Yeah, no, 1894, right? He went to the exhibition in 1889. So this music influenced Stravinsky's music, and which will stand. We listened to his Rite of Spring in the theater section, and it also influenced Schoenberg's music. So here is just a little bit of a piece of music, because he wrote a lot of beautiful Debussy, a lot of beautiful pieces for piano, right? And this is a painting, and I'm pointing out because the piece of music we're going to hear is the Sunken Cathedral, and Impressionist painting, piano music. Again, try and lock in your mind what this impressionistic music sounds like. Here's another piece, an orchestral piece by Claude Debussy, just a minute or two of it. It's called Nuages, which really means clouds, and how appropriate to want to paint clouds as an impression for light, and then to write music that is called clouds. So he also has pieces that are called a piece called La Mer, which is about the sea and the ocean and the waves. And so it's kind of like what the music is. Here, sample a little bit of this. Okay, you get the idea. So Impressionism right? A French movement developed by visual artists who favored vague, blurring images intended to capture an impression of the subject. Impressionism in music is characterized by exotic scales, unresolved dissonances, parallel chords, rich orchestral tone color, and free rhythms. Ninth chords, we talk about these extended chords that are used in the impressionistic music. Anyway, that's some samplings of Claude Debussy, and that is the conclusion of chapter 49.